Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from the various time zones that you're joining us. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Dr. Racheli Kreisberg. She's an experienced genealogist, tour guide, and entrepreneur living in Israel. Racheli has been commemorating her grandfather, Simon Wiesenthal, since he passed away in September 2005. She develops the Simon Wiesenthal Genealogy Geolocation Initiative, called SWIGGI. She holds a Ph.D. in Biotechnology and Molecular Microbiology and an Executive MBA from Tel Aviv University. She has also done an M.Sc in Chemistry from Technion. Racheli, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. I will share my screen. I'm very, very pleased to be here and to give the presentation on the life and legacy of Simon Wiesenthal and on the SWIGGI platform. I will talk about 5 different topics, some more in length and some less. They include the life of Simon Wiesenthal, the fact that he was a Nazi hunter, his legacy, the way people commemorate Simon Wiesenthal, and the Simon Wiesenthal Genealogy Geolocation Initiative. First, I want to say that Simon Wiesenthal was my grandfather. Okay, so beyond everything, he is my grandfather. And here you can see a few pictures of him and me. I don't have a lot of pictures of us together, and I share those, and they're very precious to me. The first one is in 1982. That was in Herzliya in Israel. And then 10 years later, you can see a picture of us in the inauguration of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. 13 years later, in February 2005, this is one of my latest pictures with my grandfather. This is in their home. I will show that also later. And a few months later, in September 2005, my grandfather passed away. Here at the back, you can see a picture of my grandmother and my mother. And at this table, a lot of stamps have been collected, and I will talk about that later. So let's start. Simon Wiesenthal was born on the 31st of December 1908 in Buchach. Here you can see a postcard of Buchach. And Buchach used to be in Galicia. Nowadays, it's in the Ukraine. His family was small. He had a mother called Rosa Rapp. His father was called Asher Hensel Wiesenthal, and he had a brother named Hillel. Unfortunately, his family had a lot of sorrow. His father was killed in 1915 in the World War I in Stanislav. His brother Hillel passed away of illness. His mother, who was a widower, remarried and moved to Dolina. And therefore, Simon Wiesenthal was actually quite alone in Buchach. But he was with friends, and you can see here that he was part of a youth organization. Here he is right in the middle. You can see that even as a young boy or a young man, he was quite tall. After he completed his studies at the gymnasium in Buchach, he started studying building engineer at the Technical University of Prague. You can see here that I note that. He married my late grandmother, Zila Müller, in 1936. Zila Müller was also from Buchach, and during that time that Simon Wiesenthal was quite alone in Buchach without his mother, and after having lost his father and his brother, he spent quite a lot of time at the family of his future wife, Zila Müller. From 1936 till 1939, he worked as an architect in Lemberg. Lemberg is today in Lvov. It's called Lvov in the Ukraine. And here you can see one of the houses that he designed. The war started, and the Jews that were living in Lvov and Lemberg moved to the ghetto. And in 1941, in June 1941, when the Germans attacked Lvov, situation got worse. So here in the middle, you can see how the Judenrat of the Lvov ghetto was hung. Sila and Simon moved to the ghetto and also to the adjacent Janowska concentration camp. My grandfather was always very good and was always, how would I say this, very well networked. And he got false papers for his wife, Rachela, and her new name was Irena Kowalska. And my grandmother moved to Germany, where she worked till the end of the war in forced labor. His mother, sorry, his mother, Rosa Raab, so the person I told you that remarried, she was murdered in Belzec in 1942. And what you can see here is a page of testimony of Yad Vashem that was completed by my mother. So that was her grandmother. Towards the end of the war, Simon Wiesenthal was also part of the Death March. Here, Lvov, above it, you can see Janowska, and he marched from Janowska through Plaszów, which is in the area of Krakow, Poland today, to Grossrosen, from there to Buchenwald in Germany, and he ended up in Mauthausen near Linz in Austria. And he survived this death march. When I looked at this, I saw a map and I saw different locations, and then I wanted to see how far is this. And I think it is quite amazing that these people, towards the end of the war, marched something like 1,500 kilometers. In Mauthausen, my grandfather was ill and he was recovering. He was there from February 1945 till the liberation. But a little bit about the camp itself. You can see here, sort of, these are stairs. These stairs were walked up by people that were carving. Here you can see granite stones in the quarry. And it was really horrible because the people had to carry these very heavy stones. They were, of course, very weak and deprived from food and everything. And while they were climbing up, suffering from fatigue, if someone fell over then or fell backwards, then he would sort of tremble over all the people that were walking behind him. And therefore, it was a real horrible experience. And the Nazis, they also shot prisoners who collapsed from exhaustion. Simon Wiesenthal was liberated in 1945 by the American soldier Richard Seibel. And here you can see that he is depicted here. And among others, it is written that he liberated the Mauthausen concentration camp. At the entrance of the Mauthausen concentration camp, there was the symbol, and there are different pictures available on the internet where you see that during the liberation, this symbol was also knocked over and the camp was freed. At that time, you remember that Simon Wiesenthal was quite a tall guy. He was only weighing 39 kilos, and he started working for the Americans. What did he do else? He united with his wife. There's a whole very romantic story that someone went back to Krakow and was looking for people, family members, like many other people did. And Simon Wiesenthal asked that person to look for his wife, for Zila Müller Wiesenthal. And 3 women told that guy that they are the wife of Simon Wiesenthal. And the person decided to take one woman back with him to Simon Wiesenthal, hoping that this is his wife, and said that if it wouldn't be his wife, then he would marry her. But yes, this was Zila. So my grandparents were reunited. You can see them here. This is my grandfather and my grandmother. Here you can see them also with some other people. This is my grandfather, and here's my grandmother. And from this event, my mother was born. My mother was born in a deportation camp not far away from Mauthausen, which is called Bindermichel. And both Mauthausen and Bindermichel are not far away from Linz. So the family after the war moved to Linz. Where what else did Simon Wiesenthal do? He started commemorating the Holocaust in a very special way, and that is that he brought 30 urns with ashes of Holocaust victims in Austria to Mount Zion in Jerusalem. Let's see what we see in this picture here. Here you can see a carriage in which there are 30 urns. Each urn represents a certain region in Austria with ashes of murdered Jews. They were not necessarily Austrian Jews, but they were Jews that were murdered in Austria. And here you can see Simon Wiesenthal. And these urns, these 30 urns, are laid on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, adjacent to the old city, and they are being commemorated there. And you can see here the part which is called the Holocaust cellar, Martef HaShoah in Jerusalem. So this was one of the activities of Simon Wiesenthal. Later on, he was, of course, also very much in touch with the Yad Vashem. Beforehand, I told you about the page of testimony of Rosa Rapp of Yad Vashem. You can see the similarity between the Holocaust cellar in Mount Zion and the Yad Vashem on Mount Herzl. What else did he do? He started working for the Americans, as I said. And here you can see a picture of Simon Wiesenthal in his office in Vienna, showing on the map one of the sites of murder where he was probably looking for Nazis and their collaborators. Simon Wiesenthal also wrote books. He wrote books about his work as him being a Nazi hunter or the murderers among us. And he also wrote other books, but quite a few of the books were focusing on the Holocaust. He was lucky to have been married to Zila and to have his daughter, Paulinka. In 1960, the family moved from Linz to Vienna, and here is the house in Vienna. It's in the 19th district, not far from where you're living, Dirk Peter. In 1965, Paulinka, thus my mother, married my father, Gerard. Here is Gerard, and here is Paulinka. Here is my late grandfather, Simon Wiesenthal, and my late grandmother, Zila, and the other parents, the parents of my father, who were originally from Vienna. And from this marriage, there are 3 children. I'm the oldest, and I have 2 brothers, Dani and Yuri. And my grandparents had 8 great-grandchildren, Ella, Maya, Liron, Tali, DJ, Shani, Michael, and Gabi. Here you can see myself. And here you can see my 2 brothers, Dani and Yuri. On the 10th of November, 2003, at the age of 95, my grandmother passed away. This is a beautiful picture of her in their house in Vienna. And on September the 20th, 2005, my grandfather passed away. My grandmother was 4 months older than my grandfather, so they were the same age group, but she was a little bit older. And all in all, they spent 67 years together, which is a great period of time. Here you can see how they celebrated one of their anniversaries. Their graves are in Herzliya, which is in Israel, on the coastal area. Here you can see the tombstone of Simon Wiesenthal and of Zila Wiesenthal. Here you can see it from the front, and there is also a plaque which tells a little bit about the life of Simon Wiesenthal. So this is the first part of my talk, where I hope that I introduced you to Simon Wiesenthal from his personal perspective. Now let's move on to the second part, Simon Wiesenthal as a Nazi hunter. The first question is, what did people do after the war? So if we look at the Nazis, yes, some of them were trialed in Nuremberg, some of them returned to their home countries, and some of them escaped Europe. Here you can see a picture of the Nuremberg trials, and some of the people that were trialed are depicted in this picture. What did other people do? What did the Jews do after the war? They searched for their family. Some of them immigrated to the land of Israel. It is in 1945 till 1947. And here you can see what's called the illegal immigration of the Jews departing for Israel with special large ships, such as this ship, which is called the Four Freedoms ship. And this ship has 1,024 immigrants. And the idea was that the people will arrive to their new destinations and rebuild their lives. I will come back to this ship later when we will have a look at what it means to have 1,000 people. What did Simon Wiesenthal do after the war? As I showed you, he searched for his wife. Here she is, and he found her. But he decided that he was going to devote his life to another task, and that is to search for Nazis and their collaborators. And among others, Simon Wiesenthal also worked for the Mossad, for the Israeli intelligence. He did not resume working as an architect. I think that Simon Wiesenthal was, and I think he still is, an extraordinary man. And in the talks that I give, I try to share that with you so that you can see how special he was, and maybe also see how we could all look for things that will make our life very meaningful, like his life was. So what did he do? He started working as a Nazi hunter. He never defined himself Nazi hunter, but this was one of the terms that was associated with his work. But what does it actually mean? It means a few things. It means that you are like a detective. So first you need to collect information about the Nazis and their collaborators and gather testimonies from survivors. As I said, the Nazis, they escaped, or they returned to their homeland and of course resumed their regular life. So it is not easy to find them. On the other hand, the ones that gave the testimonies, the survivors, we said that they were looking for family, and then they also wanted to rebuild their life. And therefore, here is one of the major challenges, is to find this information about the Nazis and their collaborators on one hand, and on the other hand, to find people that would be willing to testify and go through the entire emotion of remembering and testifying what happened to them and their families during the war. The second thing was to build a file with the description of the crimes and the atrocities and the survivors' testimonies. And then this file had to be moved or transferred to the judicial authorities, because Simon Wiesenthal believed in what is written here, justice, not revenge. So all the files would be handed over to juristic parties, and people would be brought to court. And Simon Wiesenthal also participated in some of these court proceedings. One of the people that Simon Wiesenthal focused on was Eichmann. Now, Eichmann, who was responsible for the final solution, was not a person that the Jews, the survivors, saw, because he was more in the planning of this. And therefore, the fact that Simon Wiesenthal started focusing on the source of all this evil was already quite revolutionary. And therefore, it became also clear that the Holocaust was a planned event, and Eichmann's role in the destruction of the Jewish people became clear. And Simon Wiesenthal, started putting a lot of his efforts on the search for Eichmann, and he was even called Eichmann's Wiesenthal. Here you can see a picture of Adolf Eichmann, and one of the books that my grandfather wrote, which is I Hunted Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann didn't like to have pictures taken of him. And there was one picture of 1934. Let's see how we will go back to this later. As I told you, Simon Wiesenthal and his wife and daughter, they moved from the deportation camp in Bindermichel to Linz, the Austrian city Linz. And it turned out that Simon Wiesenthal was living on the Landstrasse. Here you can see a picture of the Landstrasse in number 40. This is where number 40 is today. And his landlord told them that the parents of Adolf Eichmann were living in the Landstrasse 32. So the parents of Adolf Eichmann were living 116 meters away from Simon Wiesenthal. One of the first things that Simon Wiesenthal had to deal with was the fact that the parents of Adolf Eichmann testified that their son, Adolf, was indeed an SS officer, but he did not return from the war. And in 1947, his wife, Veronika Liebel, she requested to receive a certificate from the court that her husband is dead. There was a person called Karl Lukas who testified that Eichmann was shot in Prague on the 30th of April, 1945. When Mehak introduced me, she said that I'm a genealogist. Genealogists are people that search for family history, and that is true. When you look at what I'm going to tell you now, you can see that Simon Wiesenthal probably also was involved in genealogy research. Why do I say this? Because when we look at the name of the person, Karl Lukas, who testified that Adolf Eichmann was shot, we see that Veronika, Adolf Eichmann's wife, had a sister. She was called Maria Liebel Lukas, and Maria Liebel was married to Karl Lukas. Thus, Simon Wiesenthal showed the court that there is a family connection between Karl Lukas and his brother-in-law, Adolf Eichmann. And once this connection was recognized by the court, the request of Veronika, of Vera, to have her husband being recognized as dead was denied. Adolf Eichmann is alive, and the search can continue. So now we are in December 1949, and there were, of course, attempts to catch Adolf Eichmann, to find him and to arrest him. And one of these opportunities took place when Adolf Eichmann was planning on coming to an area or a city, a town called Altaussee, which is in Austria. This was the house in which his wife, Veronika, about whom we just spoke, was staying. And the idea was that Adolf would come and be with her during New Year. So what did Simon Wiesenthal do? He traveled from Linz to this area, which is about 130 kilometers southwest, and he was hoping that Adolf Eichmann will indeed arrive there on New Year. Simon Wiesenthal was not alone. He was there together with a young boy or a young man, and that young man revealed in one of the bars of this little town, that he was from Israel, that he was Israeli. And by doing this, it became probably clear to Adolf Eichmann that it was not safe to visit the town, to spend time together with his wife. And therefore, unfortunately, he did not show up. But Simon Wiesenthal was following him. If we move on a little bit, and we are now in 1951, then you can see here a map of the globe, and the opinions about the place where Adolf Eichmann would reside, they differed. There were the sources of Simon Wiesenthal, who said that Eichmann escaped to South America with the help of this organization, which is called Odessa. It's an organization that helped SS officers to escape from Europe and to arrive safely in South America. So Simon Wiesenthal thinks that Adolf Eichmann is in South America, and the Israelis, the Mossad, and the American sources think that Adolf Eichmann is in Damascus, in Syria. Here you can see a picture of Alain Brunel, who was also a Nazi, and he escaped to Damascus, to Syria. So the Israelis and the Americans think that he is in Syria, whereas Simon Wiesenthal thinks that he is in South America. Again, I should mention this, we are talking in a pre-internet world, okay? There is no email, there is no cellular phones. This is a different world in which this whole episode takes place. Next, there are rumors that Adolf Eichmann is in South America. How did it come to the know-how of Simon Wiesenthal? If you remember, I showed you the picture in 2005 February, that I was next to my grandfather in their dining area. And here you can see that Simon Wiesenthal is indeed sitting in front of this table. And this is one of the books that are used for stamp collectors to identify the origin of a stamp. So Simon Wiesenthal was in the philately business, in the stamp business, and another stamp collector told them that he heard that Adolf Eichmann was living in a suburb of Buenos Aires in Argentina. In addition to that, here is again Vera, the wife of Adolf Eichmann. Her neighbors testified that she secretly took her children out of school. Combining those two things, we see that the thought develops that it could be that Adolf Eichmann, who was married to Veronica, and Veronica is now probably married to someone called either Clemens or Clement. And there is an assumption that Adolf Eichmann is Clement. And this assumption was verified by the Mossad, who said that indeed Vera married a person called Ricardo Clement. Here you can see his passport. This is Adolf Eichmann and Ricardo Clement, the name of Ricardo Clement. In order to find Adolf Eichmann, you need to be able to identify him. And we are now in 1960. So we are now 26 years later than the time the picture that I showed you of Adolf Eichmann from 1934 was taken. So what did Simon Wiesenthal do? There was a funeral of the father of Adolf Eichmann. The father of Adolf was called Karl Adolf Eichmann. And in 1960, he passed away. Adolf Eichmann had 4 brothers, Emil Rudolf, Friedrich, Otto, and Robert. And Simon Wiesenthal assumed that the brothers are going to attend the funeral of their father. And he asked that someone will take a picture of one of the brothers of Adolf Eichmann. And a picture was taken from Otto Eichmann. And in this picture that I don't have, I had it in the past, but I don't have it anymore. Otto Eichmann resembles Adolf Eichmann. With this picture, my grandfather, who passed that picture on to the Mossad, to the Israeli intelligence service, helped the Mossad during the Operation Finale, the operation in which Adolf Eichmann was identified in Buenos Aires, captured. You can see he's on his way to Israel with his eyes covered. This is the El Al plane that brought him back to Israel, that smuggled him back to Israel. And therefore, Simon Wiesenthal contributed to the capture of Adolf Eichmann. In Israel, on May 11th, 1960, the Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion announced from the Knesset, from the Israeli parliament, that Adolf Eichmann, who was responsible, along with other Nazi leaders, for what is called the final solution of the Jewish people that exterminated 6 million Jews of Europe, is under arrest in Israel and is facing a trial in Israel. And this was the trial that took place in Jerusalem. Here, I will show you, there is a recording. It is in Hebrew, but maybe later on you can also look for it, in which the General Attorney, Gideon Hausnell, opens the trial and states that in this place where he's standing, he is not only representing himself, but also 6 million Jews. So let's just listen to this for a second.
במקום זה, בו אני עומד לפניכם, שופטי ישראל, ללמד קטגוריה על אדולף אייכמן, אין אני עומד יחידי. עמדי ניצבים כאן, בשעה זו, 6 מיליון קטגורים.
So this is what Gideon Hausnell said, that he's not standing there alone, but he's standing there together with 6 million people that are accusing Adolf Eichmann for the final solution. Adolf Eichmann was sentenced to death. He was hanged on the 1st of June, 1962. He was cremated and his ashes were scattered at the sea in order to avoid a place where he will be buried, which could lead to people visiting that place and remembering Adolf Eichmann in a given physical location. The achievements of Simon Wiesenthal as a Nazi hunter. You can see in the literature and on the internet that Simon Wiesenthal brought 1,100 Nazis and their collaborators to justice. On the left-hand side, you can see a document in which there is a name of Alois Brunner, whom I already mentioned. I know you can't read this, but I'm just going to show you. Alois Brunner was in Damascus. You remember that I told you that there were Nazis that were in Damascus. And what you can see here is a chronological list of actions that were taken in order to look for him. So there was activity in February 1985, and then in June 1986, and in April 88, still trying to gather evidence and push for. Probably the rest of the sentence is on the next line. So you can see that Simon Wiesenthal had a lot of information on the whereabouts of Nazis. And all in all, he managed to build 1,100 cases and bring the people to justice. Among the famous Nazis, there are Franz Stangl, who was the commander of Sobibor and Treblinka, Hermina Braunsteiner, who was the mayor of Majdanek, Walter Rauff, who invented the gas vents, and also Karl Silberbauer, who was the SS officer who arrested the family of Anna Frank. And in that way, Simon Wiesenthal proved that the diary of Anna Frank was real and it wasn't fake. And he was one man. Here you can see how determined he is and how much he had to face during all those years that he was working as Nazi hunter. And I wanted just to give you an idea what it means for one person to look for 1,100 men and women and to bring them to justice. And here again, I'm going back to a boat. And on this ship, you see, this is a number, okay, of 1,100, almost 1,100 people. This one man did this job by bringing 1,100 Nazis and their collaborators to justice. There were also attempts that were unsuccessful, such as to locate and bring Josef Mengele, the angel of death, who was doing the selections in Auschwitz, to trial. But I think that Simon Wiesenthal did so much that his legacy, which I summarize in one slide, is as follows. Simon Wiesenthal restored the dignity of the Jewish people. The Jewish people were then looked at as being slaughtered, not being able to defend themselves. And also after the war, often the Holocaust survivors did not talk about the Holocaust. And in the time that the Eichmann trial took place in the 1960s, it was really the beginning of restoring this dignity. He combated Holocaust denial. I mentioned Karl Silberbauer, the SS officer who arrested the family of Anna Frank. If there is a person who admits that he arrested the family of Anna Frank, that means that her diary is correct, and that means that the Holocaust indeed happened, and Anna Frank and her sister and her mother were killed, as well as her grandmother. He remembered the 6 million Jews and other minorities, not only Jews, also Sinti and Roma and homosexuals. And again, he fought for justice, not revenge, for tolerance and humanity. And for this, he was awarded prizes. He was worldwide recognized for his activity. For instance, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom of the United States, which is the highest recognition of the States of America for the activities of a person. And here you can see a stamp that was inaugurated by the Austrian Postal Service together with the Israeli Postal Service. He received doctorates of honor and many other medals and ways that he was recognized. In the last part of my presentation, I will briefly talk about the commemoration of Simon Wiesenthal and on SWIGGI. So let's move on to the commemoration of Simon Wiesenthal. My grandfather did not forget the 6 millions. And what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we will not forget Simon Wiesenthal. And how did I start doing this? I started when Facebook was one of the tools that I could use, and developed the Simon Wiesenthal Remembrance Wall. It is a wall, it's a Facebook page that received something like almost 4,000 likes with 285 comments and over 100 shares. when I mentioned that Simon Wiesenthal passed away 20 years ago. So I use Facebook mainly to make sure to disseminate some knowledge and information on Simon Wiesenthal and let people interact, because these comments mean that people are interacting and commenting on the life and legacy of Simon Wiesenthal. In addition to that, I showed you that Simon Wiesenthal is buried in Herzliya. This is his tombstone, and here is the tombstone of his wife, my grandmother Zila. And I often organize yearly what we call a Jahrzeit, an anniversary event. And this was the event on the 20th anniversary, in which a school participated. And I really believe it's important for young people to be part of the commemoration of Simon Wiesenthal. There are streets named after Simon Wiesenthal in Europe, in Paris, in Vienna, in Israel, in other locations in South America. We also have a platform that I'll show you in a second, in which people can light digital candles for Simon Wiesenthal. So far, almost 2,500 candles have been lit by people from 68 countries. And here you can see some of the countries. You can enter these links, and then you can see the names of the people that commemorated them. As we are in a session with the United States, then you can, of course, see that also from the United States, there are a lot of people that light these candles. The Simon Wiesenthal Center that I showed you in 1992, right? There was a picture of me with Simon Wiesenthal. Now you can see it with Dr. Mark Weitzman. This was the inauguration of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. And a few years ago, the center also opened the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem that you can see over here. This is the building, and here is the entrance to the museum. In Vienna, the archive of Simon Wiesenthal was given by my mother to a new organization, which is called the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute. And this is the building. It's adjacent to the building of the Jewish community and carries out research. Among others, they have here a very nice collection of the letters that were sent, the condolences letters that were sent to our family once my grandfather passed away. And here you can see obituaries that people wrote while remembering Simon Wiesenthal in their notes. The Simon Wiesenthal Genealogy Geolocation Initiative is an initiative that I started maybe some 27 years ago when I was first doing genealogy. The platform, which is accessible via this link, Simon Wiesenthal, one word, -Galizia-AI.com, enables you to see 5 different things. The word Recht means justice in German. We said justice, not revenge, and therefore we use the term Recht to represent 5 pillars. The R stands for research, the E for education, the C for commemoration of Simon Wiesenthal, the H for Holocaust memorials, and the T for the tours. In our platform, you can search for 680,000 records in one click, and I'll show you that in a sec. One of the things that we developed is a special platform which enables us to take family trees that we develop and link them to a given place on the map, to what we call a geolocation. Linking genealogy to geolocation is what stands behind SWIGGI. And we have done this in different locations, such as in Vienna, in Lodz, in Poland, the Netherlands, Germany, and some Ukrainian shtetls, including the shtetl from which Simon Wiesenthal originated. We also develop SWIGGI deportation maps that show where were the Jews sent to. This is a map of the Netherlands, and we can see where they were sent to. But we don't stop there. What we do, I'll show you for an example in Vienna, when we have a map. In this map, there are markers. We have quite a lot of data on Vienna. Some of it is pre-war data. So these are burial records of people that are buried in the central cemetery in Vienna. as well as the deportation records. And you can search this data using a first name or a last name of a person, the birth year, the death year, but you can also search using a family tree. And in that way, all the houses in which the people of a given family lived will be displayed. And there's more. If we look at a deportation map, for instance, where were the 65,000 Jews of Vienna deported to, we can see their locations in Europe. And for every given location, we have a list, and this list has the names of the deportees, but also a link to their family tree. And what we try to do is to develop family trees for Holocaust victims so that their offspring, their descendants, will commemorate them because they know that they are part of the family tree of a Holocaust victim. If we look at a deportation map that goes into Mauthausen, you can see that Mauthausen is right here, that this terrible story that I told you about the death stairs is also exhibited at the level of the different languages that were spoken at this concentration camp. There were 100,000 Jews and the rest were non-Jewish. So you can see from all these different locations, people were transported to Mauthausen. And only this is horrific. When you are in a camp, you don't speak German, you don't understand the language of the other inmates. We enable people to search the data in two very easy forms. Or one is to search by the name of a person, and the other is to search by an address. So you can choose the location and enter the data. This is the link to the search engine. And you can also search through this one click. That's another option. I will end by showing you how we do this and telling you a little personal story. So what we're trying to do here is really geared at commemorating, understanding what happened during the Holocaust. So we focus on individual people and we tell their stories in a special way. There was a person called Shmuel Schalingel, and he was the owner of two of the best hotels in Vienna. One of the hotels is the Imperial. This is the Imperial Hotel, and like Vienna is, it is magnificent. So this was a hotel owned by this person who was Jewish, Shmuel Schalingel. In 1938, he was forced to sell this hotel, and he was murdered in Theresienstadt in the Czech Republic in 1942. Even without going into what happened to him in a pictographic way, knowing that he was once the owner of this magnificent hotel and seeing where he ended up is terrible. But it's even more because the hotel was taken over by the Nazis. And you can see here Adolf Eichmann standing on the balcony of the hotel and talking to the crowds. What happened later is that we decided to commemorate the Jews that contributed to the economy and the development of Vienna, such as Shmuel Schalingel and other industrialists and people that were very wealthy, and they were living on the Ringstraße, the Open Ring and the Kärtner Ring. So we developed special tours in which you can go to all these places and you will learn a lot about the whereabouts of these people. There is a link. It's all available online, so you can do the tour yourself. But what happened on Simon Wiesenthal's 90th birthday in the Imperial Hotel? There was a celebration for his birthday. Who organized that party? It was organized by the Simon Wiesenthal Center. You remember that in 1992, the Simon Wiesenthal Center was inaugurated in Los Angeles. The person behind the establishment of the Simon Wiesenthal Center is Rabbi Heyer. Rabbi Heyer, you might have seen when President Trump was inaugurated in his first presidency. There was a rabbi, and this is Rabbi Heyer. So they were celebrating my grandfather's 90th birthday, 6 years before he passed away, or 6.5 years before he passed away. And what Simon Wiesenthal says is, look, even the chandeliers in the hotel, you can see the chandeliers are shaking, says Simon Wiesenthal during this dinner. Hitler is gone, the Nazis are no more, but we are still here singing and dancing. If you're interested in getting involved in this commemoration and research project, you're most welcome. You can develop family trees of Holocaust victims, develop educational programs like the ones we developed together with the Austrian Parliament and with schools. You can work with us on the digital commemoration of Simon Wiesenthal, develop Holocaust memorial events for Holocaust victims, and develop those unique tours that we have. All this work could not have been done without the great collaboration that I have with two very dear people. One is Yossi Beck, who is also from the Netherlands, who is a programmer, and Maya Zakarin, who is the great-granddaughter of Simon Wiesenthal. She's one of my daughters. You can see us here. And with this, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your powerful lecture today. And I think hearing your perspective, both as a genealogist and as Simon Wiesenthal's granddaughter, was an honor and a blessing. And I'm sure I speak for all the audience here that you created a very meaningful space for discussion and reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.